Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network. I'm Lee Hutchison and I'm joined by Dallas King as we make our way through the A24 filmography and bring you interviews with the talent involved in front of and behind the camera along the way. In this episode, I welcome actor Ernest Emmanuel Peeples to discuss his career on stage and screen and his recent appearance in Janicza Bravo's Zola. For those not familiar with the Twitter thread brought to life on the big screen, Zola, a waitress, agrees to accompany an exotic dancer, Stefani, her put-upon boyfriend, and her mysterious and domineering roommate on a road trip to Florida to seek their fortune at a high-end strip club. However, their arrival in Tampa brings them into potential conflict, with he, played by Ernest Emmanuel Peeples, a Tampa-based sex and drug pusher. Thanks so much to Ernest for joining me, and I hope you too will enjoy this episode.
You want to hear a story about how me and this bitch fell out? It's kind of long, but it's full of suspense.
For those tuning in, that this is their first introduction to you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Ernest Emmanuel Peeples. I'm an actor, writer, voiceover artist, and model based primarily out of Atlanta, but also Chicago.
And have you always been interested in acting, performing arts? You sound like quite the creative talent.
Oh, thank you. I've always had a penchant for writing, and then acting was something I discovered in late middle school, early high school, when I took a couple introductory classes, needed to find a niche because I also have ocular albinism, which leaves me visually impaired. So there was a required art class credit that I needed for high school, and I couldn't physically do the visual art drawing class because my handwriting's rubbish. So drawing in itself is very bad. So my mom suggested, well, why don't you just try acting? I took some classes in middle school. It seemed okay. Took a chance at it. I liked the class. The director encouraged me to audition for the freshman year production of Fools by Neil Simon. I was cast as the Count, the antagonist in the role, and the rest was history. Been doing it ever since.
How have you turned it into a career ever since? Has it been sort of a challenge, or what's been kind of your route to becoming a professional?
Well, I realized a long time ago that with my differences in outward appearance, being a black man with albinism, I actually used to live in the UK when I was a kid. I went to the American Community School. I think they've rebranded to ACS International at the Cobham branch because I used to live in Cobham and then briefly in Woking. So that was like first through fifth grade, and then before moving back to the States. And I've learned early on that I would attract a lot of stares because of being outwardly different. And my dad always mentioned, well, if they're going to stare at you anyway, give them something to look at. So I channeled that through my acting. And, as an artist, I ultimately want to change the perceptions of albinism in the media through my work in any medium. And, typically it's either not presented at all, or you get depictions like in the Da Vinci Code, where it's overly deranged, non-sympathetic, antagonistic characters with no reason for being monsters or evil, simply because they're different. Dan Brown's novel does a little bit better of fleshing out the character to understand his motivations, but all of that was absent from film. And I've tried to create works for myself and take jobs that will pursue and further show that people like myself or anyone with any outward disability is valued, human, and not as different as what might be perceived as different by others.
I saw it was on your Instagram page, and you mentioned it there that you want to change the perception of albinism sort of in media through your work. For maybe those that aren't familiar with that, could you tell people a little bit about sort of that condition and maybe some of the barriers that affect actors?
Sure. Well, it's a recessive gene condition, which will only occur if you have two parents who are carriers for the disease. Oh, condition, not disease. And it's a very rare chance that you actually get someone with the condition. And that results in a lack of pigment in the skin, eyes, and hair of the individuals. There are different types. You can technically still have ocular albinism and have pigment throughout the rest of your skin. You can alternatively um, have, you know, only just it missing in the hair um, as well, and different levels of profundity throughout. And what often accompanies it with ocular albinism is with the lack of pigmentation in the eyes, you get a hypersensitivity to light and sunlight and UV rays. So, that requires a lot of use of sunscreen, being in, hypersensitivity to warmer temperatures. Ever since I was younger, I've always had, hat and sunglasses wherever I go if I'm outside, and had to practically bathe in sunscreen as a kid, and still do to a certain extent. And then with the visual challenges, I'm also legally blind as well, and that often accompanies a lot of people with the condition.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you mentioned blindness there. Say, for example, when you get a script or a theatre plays, how do you take on board that information? Is it always presented to you in Braille, or is it something that you end up having to sort of almost demand as sort of an adjustment?
Sure. Well, while I'm not 100% blind, the typical normal sized font is often very difficult for me to read, especially if it's around like 12 point font. I can barely read it myself for extended periods of time. So what I'll typically do is I would request to get electronic copies of my scripts, and that way I could access them. Before, back in the day, well, right when I started acting, I used to have like these huge 10 by, I think it was probably about 10 by 17 page scripts for some of my enlarged work to just make it easier to see. But nowadays, whenever I get a project, I will get the document as a electronic PDF, and then see if I can get the script worked up in a Word format so that I can then enlarge the script myself, and then I make annotations within the script to show where the actual pagination is for the non-enlarged one, so that I can follow along.
There's obviously been a lot of discussion in the past few years about sort of how to get representation within cinema, especially with people with disabilities. I always go back, think of that recent film. I think it had his name's completely escaped me, but the chap that was in Breaking Bad, where they're like, but there are people out there, for example, in a wheelchair that you could cast in this film. What can Hollywood or the film industry do to provide sort of better representation?
Well, I think the important thing is it really falls down on directors and casting directors to have more of an open mind, which a lot of agencies and companies are starting to do now, with the rise of being more inclusive in projects. When I started acting professionally in 2017, there that's when I noticed the beginning of the, you see less roles now that are written for specifically, white, male, or racially based casting. Now, the all ethnicities is, unless it's very specific to the story, are being more accepted for all types of roles. And you really just have to truly honor that, and then push a little farther to say, well, just because the individual isn't written as a visually challenged or visually impaired or outwardly looking different character, that doesn't mean they couldn't exist in the realm of the world, because we do. And it's just really giving individuals who voices aren't always heard as clearly, a chance to be heard and be seen, just despite the fact that they might look like something that you weren't expecting.
I always think of like if it's my day job, I work with people with disabilities and health conditions to help them into employment. So that can mostly in sort of the digital and tech jobs, for example. And one thing we always think about is that, you know, the adjustments that some people need, perhaps whether it's to be an actor or to be on stage, sometimes they can be quite minor, but it can really help with that representation of helping someone, bringing in something, you know, diversifying a workforce and people that we can and see. You know, I've noticed, obviously, you've mentioned it, you've got such great experience on stage, for example. You know, when you're going on stage, is there certain like adjustments, for example, that you need when it comes to performing, as well as kind of, you've touched on the ones that you need for script? Would you need something particular for when you're on kind of stage, for example?
Well, it's a great question. For myself, it's really just extra time understanding the what the set design is going to be, and then getting in the space as soon as possible helps because um, with the stage lights, I'm not necessarily blinded by them if I'm like doing a direct address or monologue soliloquy to the audience. But it can be difficult to see the lip of the stage. So understanding where our full play spaces are early helps. It also, it might take me or someone like myself with my set of challenges a little longer to learn certain blocking sequences, particularly if they are filled with, if it's like an ensemble dance call sort of thing. It takes me longer to physically watch and learn the move sets because if even if I'm in the front of the room, it can be difficult to follow up with everything that the choreography is going through on like a one-to-one basis. So it might take me, taking the extra time to work with myself uh, or someone with my challenges because I can do it. I did, martial arts for 15 years. So fight calls and things like that come pretty naturally. I just have to be sure what all of the movements and parts are go into for that.
What is life like for you as a theatre actor? Many of our guests that we've had on here have been people that have just predominantly started in either sort of TV or film, but you're one of our few sort of theatre actors. What's the kind of your weekly life like as a theatre actor?
I'd say that there are a few. Some of the distinctions are there's a lot of crossover in a certain extent to where I still I look on Backstage, Actors Access, Playbill.com, Broadway World, um, every day looking for breakdowns for roles. I also spend a lot of time reading plays and new plays when I can find them for sources of inspiration. Doing regular workout routines to stay physically in shape, uh, and then vocal warm ups. And then when it comes to when, and this is all stuff that I do throughout the week when I'm not in a show. When I am in a show, you then have to, you go to rehearsals either in the evenings or the daytime. It's usually 6 to 8 hours, depending on the project. Then learning your lines. I prefer to, when cast in enough time, I prefer to be off book before I get to set. One, if I have to read from a script with my impairment, uh, it is very difficult to actually perform because I have to read from like this distance, so it's like barely a few inches from my face. So you're not going to get any actual performance from me if we're doing it then. So learning lines is a habit I had to learn and have learned to do very quickly. And then yeah, so come prepared to do the work and then just be ready to play with all the circumstances.
You've appeared in a lot of works of Shakespeare on stage. Do you have an affinity for his work?
I have a special love for Shakespeare, and of classical pieces, whether it's my voice or, it just, I've always had a natural affinity towards doing it. And I love doing it whenever I can. I actually just finished a production of Julius Caesar with the Pacific Repertory Theater in Carmel by the Sea, California, uh, where I played Brutus in a a a very aggressive cutting of the script. So our Caesar can be done upwards to about 2.5 hours or 3 hours if about 2.5 hours if you do roughly the whole script. Our cutting brought it down to about an hour and 10 minutes. No. 110 minutes was our runtime. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience to work in Carmel and to explore Shakespeare's text in a new contemporary light, because we had ours to use a lot of American iconography to reflect the civil unrest that has happened over the past years with the killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and all the injustices that people of color have faced due to America's historical inability to handle racial issues.
I think that's one of the things where, Shakespeare was very much of its time, but so much of its works continues to be reimagined for kind of present day situations. Is that something that is a real affinity for yourself?
Yes, indeed. That's, and especially with it, with any public domain work, you can reimagine it and set it wherever you please. And that just speaks to the genius behind Shakespeare, whether you want to say he's, whichever school of thought you have on who the author is. For me, it doesn't matter personally. The works stand for themselves, and you can put them roughly anywhere.
Is there any sort of Shakespeare characters that you're drawn to, or particular texts, for example?
I really do love, Hamlet's always been one of my favorites, as is Macbeth and Othello. But my two probably favorite Shakespeare characters are probably outside from Hamlet would have to be Aaron the Moor from Titus Andronicus, and then the Iago from Othello, because while I studied with the British American Drama Academy in Oxford at Magdalen College in the summer of 2015, and we got to see their production of the RSC's production of Othello, where it was the RSC's first time of using an actor of color to play Iago. Hugh Corshi was playing Othello, and then Iago was played by Lucian Massamati. And in a casting like that, when that's always been Othello has always been considered Shakespeare's race play, but when you make the central antagonist black, it really speaks to how heartbreaking and damaging that relationship can be when society places, one person over another. And, you have the character of Cassio, who gets elevated above Iago, even though Cassio is a drunk and not necessarily fit for the role. He still gets put on, gets all the routines for it, and the value in Iago is just left jilted. And Masmati's performance was one that solidified for me, if nothing else, how much fun you could have with Shakespeare.
Are you looking forward to? I was lucky enough to see it at the London Film Festival, but Denzel Washington as Macbeth. Are you looking forward to that?
I am. Another A24 film. Yes, I'm very excited for that one.
Is there an attraction for Americans to the kind of the Bard's work? It seems to be something where actors love to do, they can be in the biggest movies, but they always seem to want to do Hamlet or Othello or something on stage or screen. is there something that's built into sort of the American psyche or the industry over there in terms of how it's taught that Shakespeare seems to be something that everyone wants to do at some point or another?
Well, I think a lot of it also revolves around training, right? There, and no disrespect to any film actors who don't have strong theater backgrounds, because I have seen plenty who from all forms. But I was always taught, and I personally believe that if you have a strong any any theater actor can do outstanding work on stage because that training is cemented in them. But it doesn't necessarily cross over if a film actor was to go straight to stage without that training, because there are different muscles that you have to work. And Shakespeare is a true testing ground for that, because you have the language, which is which can be far more difficult and far more technical to understand and practice than what you see in contemporary cinema. And then, the artistry of performing Shakespeare and understanding it to a point to where you can deliver those lines without always sounding as if it's Shakespeare, because you want to get down to a point to where the text actually sounds like everyday speech. And that's the challenge that that sort of challenge is not always as accessible on a film set. And then with film sets as well, they aren't the true actor's medium. It's the director's medium. We humble actors are there to support that vision, but at the end of the day, the stage is really where actors get the most license to truly act and do their thing. Um, Film I've always considered a director's medium. Television is truly a writer's medium, because of the license that you can do with writing for TV. And then the stage is for, I think, personally, for the actors.
For those whose first introduction to you was your appearance in Zola, is there any sort of your previous work that you'd recommend people to check out or find?
Ooh, yes, there's a short film that I did here in Atlanta, called Catch. We're actually in the middle of crowdfunding to bring it up to recapture it as a limited series, and it deals with the story of a young black teenager, Tahir Bowman, who loves superheroes but wants to create a superhero story where there's no tragic backstory for the hero. He's then pulled over and stopped by police, which would turn into another fatal shooting, but then he develops superpowers, very similar to the character that he has just completed writing. And then he finds out that his parents have been his home. He comes back home to find that his parents have been murdered by a mysterious individual, for reasons that he has to work out later. And I do end up playing that mysterious individual. But and while the antagonistic roles are something that I've always done well, but don't necessarily always enjoy for what I want to do with my career, as long as there are very clear motivations for that character to be who they are, outside of it just being one note, I have no problems with that. So Catch is a good example. And then, unfortunately, most of many of with it being theater, many of my plays haven't been filmed. But I would check that out. And then I'm also working on a new feature film, which will be, I guess, premiering sometime next year. That's shooting here in Atlanta, called Meditate One, which is a look at the lengths that creatives will go to make their movies.
Based on this podcast, that sounds like something I would be immediately interested in. And you mentioned that you're from Atlanta. we're all becoming a bit now familiar with the industry down there of seems to attracting your Marvels, your Disneys, your big studios. I think we all know that stretch of Atlanta freeway that seems to appear in every kind of film. Are you someone that's kind of been born and bred in sort of Atlanta, Georgia, and seen that transformation over time, or have you been someone that's kind of moved to Atlanta, Georgia, to take advantage of this kind of Hollywood in the South almost?
Well, I'm actually originally from Chicago, Illinois, but then we moved around a lot when I was a kid. The move to London being a large part of that. But I moved to Atlanta because my dad's side of the family is from the outside areas just outside of Atlanta, Conyers, Lithonia, and then in the countryside of Georgia called Gibson, very small town, way east. And I also went to Morehouse College to receive my bachelor's in English while I was still working on doing my acting. And being a Morehouse man, Atlanta is, for if you're not familiar with the school in the UK, it's the premier institution for a historically black college to train young black men into being the best versions of themselves and world leaders in every facet of the community. Martin Luther King, Spike Lee are both noted alumni from the institution. And Samuel L. Jackson.
Does it make it more competitive when you go to auditions now, or is there more opportunities for sort of everyone?
I'd say it's a bit of both. There is a lot of opportunity and a lot of work in Atlanta, COVID notwithstanding. And I would say that from a competitive standpoint, it doesn't feel as aggressive, at least in the circles that I've been in, as like say your LAs or New Yorks. And maybe it's a Southern hospitality thing, but there's I've found a very strong and collective artistic community here. And while I am looking to and always look to relocate wherever the work is, Atlanta is definitely one of the best places for it right now, I feel.
I look forward to turning on Disney Plus one day and noticing you in some sort of Marvel superhero going, I interviewed that guy one day. I'm sure that's got to be coming up on the horizon.
You and me both, Lee. You and me both.
When did you sort of first hear about the opportunity to get involved in Zola?
It's funny. I actually was working on my first professional play here in Atlanta in 2018, I believe. It was God of Carnage, which is a very funny comedy by, I want to say it's Yasmin Reza, I believe is the playwright. And a friend of mine who I was playing Alan, and then who's this, kind of uptight businessman person who's obsessed with his phone during this meeting that these two couples are having about their kids having a fight at school. And Alan could care less. And then his wife, she also is very little involved or cared about the situation. And then the young woman who was playing my stage wife, she had a friend come in from, I believe, Tampa to see the show, and the friend was telling her about a casting call for this movie that was shooting in Tampa, and they were actively looking for someone with albinism or vitiligo to play a role in the film. And it was closing night of the show. We were saying goodbye. She said, "Hey, if you're interested in this, you should, go ahead and submit." And I said, "Why not?" And I was riding the train back home. Sent the email around midnight. 8:00 in the morning when I was riding the train to work, I started getting calls, and within about a 12-hour window, I was contacted. Less than that, really. And within like 24 to maybe 48 hours at most, I was talking to Janicza Bravo, the director of the project, about it and what she wanted from me. And that was it.
How rare or common is it to get kind of casting calls where they're like, we want someone with albinism, for example? Is that very rare? And did they kind of say why, for example, that was something that they were after for the character of he, for example?
It's very rare. I will say, to have it explicitly written out. And then in most instances where it is, it's usually to it's often, unfortunately, to perpetuate some of those negative stereotypes that I discussed earlier. But the beautiful thing with because that was my first concern when I saw the read about the breakdown, and Janicza told me flat out that she wants to capture a world that shows the communities that she's lives in and inhabits, and albinistic people live in that world, so there's no reason why they shouldn't be in there. And she was very much involved in making sure that he was represented as just a typical dude uh, living in living in and around this Tampa motel. And you know, we shot one additional scene which didn't make the final cut of the film for he they sort of like to but it was that one shot when they first get to the motel where it's pulling back and they're getting out of the Jeep. uh in what I worked on, there was a sequence where I'm having this argument with this woman about I guess he was, I believe, sleeping with a friend of hers and didn't have time for her nonsense. So yeah, it was a fun role and a fun way to just show the normalcies of being anyone.
Once you had that conversation with Janicza, did you have to have like a proper audition after that, or was it very much that conversation and you've got the role?
That was it. She I believe she had looked into, because I don't even think I feel like I barely would have had a reel at that point because that was still very I was still very new to Atlanta and still very new to doing film. So I if I had anything in my reel at that time, it would have only been probably one or two monologues and maybe excerpts from a poorly filmed stage play or something. But no, we just talked, um, and that was it.
What was your sort of impression of Janicza in that moment? Because we were lucky enough to interview her in person at
Yes.
Sundance, London, and she is a great personality. You get this impression that she is like a force of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think one of the conversations where we had, where she was like, the original script for Zola, it felt like it had its dick swinging, etc. Like there's no airs and graces, which I just love to hear
Yes.
from someone.
Yes.
What was that like for you as an actor to go, this is someone that you can almost put your trust in?
I I couldn't say enough that it was more refreshing and a great experience to be on because Zola was my first time on a SAG set, and I couldn't have been happier meeting someone who was as open and honest about her vision and what she wanted. And she was very firm in that, but she still allowed the actors and artists involved to bring themselves wholly holistically to the project. And in fact, that entire sequence that I did with Jason Mitchell that did make the film, all of that was improv. She just told us, hey, um, we need some footage of you guys interacting, and just shoot the shit. And that was, and so that's what we did for about an hour or so, give or take. 45 minutes to an hour. I think that's how long we worked on to, working that shot, something like that. It was fun, and she is definitely a force of nature, and I would love nothing more than to work with her again, or anyone involved on that project. But especially Janicza's energy and vibe is just great, and that was evident from our first phone conversation where she talked to me about the project.
How familiar were you with the sort of Twitter story of Zola?
I remember I was in college when it first broke, and I was with some friends, or some friends were chilling at my place, and one of uh, a friend of mine who she's now a doctor, uh, practicing doctor. She was reading the Twitter feed aloud to us because she's like, you guys have to hear this stuff, and I'm I have never really been the biggest social media guy, especially not on Twitter. But she was reading it out, and I was just like, this is absurd in all the best ways. And then hearing at the end of once it was circulating, I heard there was talk about it being made into a movie, and then that was the last I thought of it um, until I started getting the calls.
I'm probably paraphrasing Janicza a little bit here, but when we spoke with her, we spoke about like this is like the first ever Twitter movie in a sense, and she was like, I treated that text like it's a Shakespeare or it's drawn from one of the richest books of all time. Is that something that you adopted as well when you're sort of reading the script of thinking, well, this is just a new way of potentially kind of making films, and we've drawing from that material and treating it kind of seriously?
It's definitely a maverick and a one of as of now one of a kind new way of telling a story, and it's evident from how the film was cut and put together, and uh, even the incorporation of the tweet sound effects within the film itself is brilliant. But yeah, no, I completely agree. She stuck to her source material and treated it with the reverence that it was deserved for being an adaptation. And as someone who studied English personally and a writer myself, the thing that hurts me the most when I see films that are based on literature is when the filmmakers, it's either evident that they didn't read the text that it was based on, or they just choose to make certain alterations for no rhyme or reason, and it just hurts the overall quality of the finished product. And it's just clear that with Zola, Janicza worked very hard to maintain that, and it's evident in the film.
Did you create a backstory for your character? Because yours could easily be someone that could be potentially drawn from real life, because obviously Zola herself is involved in the film, or was it someone where kind of like, oh, actually there was this kind of person involved? So did you sort of tap into that kind of knowledge, or just decide to draw your own kind of conclusions and backstory?
When I officially booked the role, I didn't get the whole script, I believe, until I got to set. So as I was reading through it and using my lines out of context that I had, I tried to make an approximation of where and about in the story he would fit. And then from there, since there aren't a whole lot of there's no clearly defined version of who he would be in the source text. But so from there, I just took my own creative licenses to, as Meisner say, would create, live truthfully under the imaginary circumstances within the scene, and that's where I started. Worked closely with my scene partner in the scene that didn't make the film, and then also with Jason to, understand what kind of business we ran, and how long we've been doing it for, if it was a good week or a bad week, and go from there.
Did you have many variations of that kind of conversation? Because I suppose the one that you kind of have just now is you very much get the impression of sort of like that sort of how they view women and the talk about them. Was there many sort of different variations or takes on these kind of characters?
It was a while ago. So my memory's a wee bit foggy on the specifics, but I will say that we tried it a couple of different ways. But after before we got to shooting, I spent some time, reviewing the Twitter story again, and then I got to talk with Jason a little bit more as well, and as well as some of the other cast members, like Coleman, to try to understand and get a better feel for the film, and then what it was like working there, and I just built my experiences from there, and then just walking and seeing the area, both in the evenings and during the day before my call time.
I suppose you mentioned Coleman Domingo there. I was thinking when I was looking at your scene, I think excluding his character, if I'm being generous, I think every male character in this movie has the oddest fashion sense. Maybe it's because I've never been to Tampa. I've been to like Disneyland, but I've never been to Tampa. Like we're introduced to your character in this like thick gold watch,
Mm-hmm.
like the baggy white
Mm-hmm.
shorts and shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and like the thick caterpillar boots.
Mm-hmm.
Did they
Mm-hmm.
give you an insight into the choices behind them, or did you have much to say
Oh,
yourself?
oh no, we uh yeah, you're right. That we talked I talked briefly with the costumer before we while we were when I first got to set and to get fitted for everything, and she had a pretty clear vision on she and Janicza had a pretty clear vision on what they wanted for the show, and to because Tampa is it's a very interesting place, because Florida in and of itself is a very interesting place. And with that, you have a host of varying and contradictory styles. Because who wears Tim's in the summer outside of New York? You would think, right? And apparently he does. Yeah.
I love watching your reaction to Derek, where you're sort of just like your head is almost like sort of quite regal, like what's this guy? You can almost just look. You're just looking right through him, like he's trying to bluster his way of like through things, but you're like, nah, I've seen this before. Like, what was kind of going through your head, sort of as he's like trying to just get this lighter, but you can almost just feel like you guys are trying to feel him out, see if he's kind of this weak kind of person that you can perhaps maybe take advantage of or try and get some information
Oh,
out
as
of.
soon as we see him walk out the door and see him on the street, um, we immediately know he's an easy mark. Because for the story that I've built for you know, my character and Jason's character, we'd been running this moderately successful drug operation with robbery and fencing things on the side, and so who comes and who leaves out of those motels, especially if you're there on the regular. And he very much was not a person we would have. My character clocked the Jeep when it came in, so it was already assumed that him coming with Coleman's character driving that car, and with the women that were there originally, there's going to be some money there. So he's our easy access into it. So we're just looking for the best way to abuse his sensibilities.
I love Succession, so I've got to ask, what is Nicholas Braun like to work with? He is
Oh
like a
man.
genius in my
Oh,
eyes.
Nick is very, very very committed to his work, and also just a very open and just overall nice guy. But he was very particular about making sure that he had the right shoes, even for the character, to make sure that they felt right, because I think he was getting a costume adjustment around the same time that I was getting fitted for my stuff. So he's very detailed, uh, and he's very much likened to I'd say he takes the necessary and even extra mile to understanding the idiosyncrasies of his characters, and isn't afraid to make them grotesque. Uh, as well. And I mean, that honestly goes for just about anybody in the cast that I had the pleasure of working with.
You obviously, you mentioned you'd sort of been involved with sort of Common Domingo. Obviously, we didn't get to see you two on screen. What was that kind of cast like to work with on your time on set? What did you have any sort of memorable experiences with them?
I would say the most memorable ones were, um, the having lunch and then just getting to talk to them on a, actor to actor basis. I had conversations with Jason. I had conversations with pretty extensive one with Coleman, because we both know a lot of the same people in Atlanta, and he's also a playwright as well, and started primarily with playwriting, and so we had a lot of great discussions during our lunch dinner breaks, and then similar discussions with Riley as well. And yeah, it was a very welcoming experience, and I didn't have really any expectations or knew what to expect working on a project like this. Um, but everyone from all aspects of crew and cast were inviting and open, and it's just we're all there to do what we love, and the respect is given to that, and it was just great to be with that collective group of artists from all sides.
We spoke about Janicza as an individual and a person. What's she like as a sort of director on set?
As a director, she's very focused, and she will, you're juggling 10 million things uh, with, from directing, but she will always, if there's a need or an issue with something, she will always make sure that the actors are listened to and are heard. But if there's something that she wants in a shot, she's going to get it. And but you never feel as if you're just set dressing or anything.
How do you look back on your experience on Zola? It's now been a couple of years. While the film is relatively fresh and new to a lot of us, it's been a couple of years since it was shot. How do you look back on your time on Zola? And is there anything that you've taken away from your involvement?
I'd say what I've taken away the most from working on Zola is the fact that it it was my first introduction to working on a SAG project of any scale at that time, and it showed me how how much fun and how real the possibility of working on these kinds of projects are. It was also the first time I'd really been cast in something where I wasn't just an overt antagonist, because that was pretty much my entire high school and part of my collegiate career was playing these not irredeemable characters, but often just not the kind of things that I wanted to do. I wanted to take challenges, and I wanted to take challenging roles and push boundaries, which I always felt I could do in Shakespeare. But whenever it came to contemporary work, or especially even period pieces to a degree, it's still difficult to get cast in those, because it might send an asynchronous message for individuals who are unaware of what albinism is and how it would look in, like, say, a piece about the civil rights movement. I'm sure there were individuals like myself involved, but that imagination can be harder to espouse for directors and casting directors when it comes to putting together projects. And I just applaud and thank for allowing me the opportunity to play he and just be a simple everyman representation of what it's like to live in that environment under those circumstances.
how did you get to see the film for the first time, and what was your reaction?
Well, I wanted to originally go to the Sundance premiere in January of 20, but I was actually working on another play, and the tickets were a little bit out of my price range anyway. But when it released in theaters on opening night, I took myself to on a date to go see it in theaters. Still in the middle of the pandemic, like we are. But I had theater mostly to myself with a few other people, and I got to watch the movie, and it was great.
How frustrating was it for you as an actor when you've got this film that you've worked on and it's just constantly being delayed, rightly due to sort of the
Whew.
COVID pandemic, but A24 were like determined to
Hmm.
put it into the cinemas, which was
Yeah.
great. Is that frustrating as an actor? You're like, I've got, like, as you mentioned, I might not have had all this exposure on screen, but
Hmm.
there's something I can get out into the world. Was that
Hmm.
a frustration for you amongst everything kind of going on?
Yeah, that was hard because again we shot it and it was shot in the late quarter of 2018. I think I finished my play in October, so I believe my days on set were around November, mid-November sometime. And then you know, uh the original I think release window was around maybe summer of 19 maybe. Um but then, with everything with the pandemic, it just it just kept getting pushed back more and more. And I kept telling people, I'm like, yo, man, I mean, this great movie, it's gonna be awesome. You can't wait to see it. And then every time, it's just like, oh, all right, I guess soon.
What's life been like for you as an actor these kind of past couple of years with sort of COVID, especially theatre? I've missed, live theatre or something like that, to be able to watch actors up close and to see that. What's it been like for you, and how have things been as you've kind of almost returned to quote unquote normal?
Well, it was difficult. I had my challenges like everyone else. I'd started I was in the middle, right before COVID shut the world down. I was in the middle of the third run of a new play called Ghost, based off of a Jason Reynolds novel by the same name, where it deals with this young black student from Baltimore, who joins this track team to learn how to use the trauma of growing up in a lower income area, and then also having his father pull a gun on him and his mother when he was younger, and then uh, being incarcerated because of that. He deals with all that by joining this community track team and learning to run towards something as opposed to running away from his problems. And then Idris Goodwin developed Jason Reynolds' novel into a great, an amazing TYA show, which was in the middle of a Rolling World premiere. Initially at Idris Goodwin's theater, then it went to the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, where I performed in it, and then we did another run of the show with Metro Theater Company in St. Louis, and I was in the first week of rehearsal in Chicago with Adventure Stage Chicago, working on what was going to be, I believe, the end of that rolling premiere. But then COVID happened right before we started our second week, and project was initially postponed and then canceled altogether due to complications with getting because TYA shows, they all revolve around schools, and no schools are taking field trips to see plays, for obvious reasons. But after that, I finally broke into voice acting. I My voice, just outside of my look, is one of my most marketable features. And I'd made a demo reel right before I left to do Ghost in St. Louis, but I hadn't really bought my own equipment. But then once the pandemic started and I saw no new avenues for performance, in the ways that I was used to. I was just like, well, let's explore this voiceover thing. And that's where I got this lovely mic here and started doing a couple of radio plays. I'm working on doing some narration, do a little bit of audio erotica for a few companies, and working on getting into audiobook narration as well.
Fantastic. I know when I heard your voice for the first time before our interview, I was like, I think I would just love to see you on stage doing Shakespeare. You've got like a hell of a great voice. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
The film Zola was obviously produced by sort of A24. What's it like for you as an actor to have one of their films in your filmography already?
Oh, it's an absolute honor and joy. You know, Moonlight, along with The Last Black Man in San Francisco, are, you know, two standout films. And Zola as well. I've always appreciated how A24 is takes these really interesting and bold stories and delivers them in such an unflinching way, often with very, very great and revolutionary cinematography. Because I can't think of a single A24 film that I've seen that hasn't been, where the story hasn't been compelling, but it's also just great to look at, you know. But no, the fact that I have Zola already, when at this stage in my career, to have an A24 film is just, it's great. It's great. Couldn't be happier.
What have you got coming up that people should look out for?
For right now, I actually have there are two audio plays that you can look up that are available on Apple Podcasts with the Standby for Places podcast. The one is the most recent one, I believe, that they just released last Wednesday, is called the Family Secrets Drama, which is a new play that takes a bunch of family secret plays like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Death of the Salesman, and Fences, and then just sort of blends them together in this beautiful cacophony of voices and satire. It's side-splittingly funny. And then there's another one called Deeper Alexandria, which is a look at two AI training. This one AI voice is training another AI program how to basically do its jobs and complete its functions as an AI. But the newer model is becoming more self-aware, and the older one sort of resents it for it. And it's another play on the George and Martha story. Yeah. And then as far as film, when Metatake 1 is released, that would be one to look for, along with what's the name of that other film? There's another short coming out soon called This Is How It Starts, which is a acid horror film that I star in as this friendly neighbor, blind, sagacious neighbor who comes in and out of the short. And then one last project, Never Blink, which is a horror film produced by the Booth brothers, which I think should be coming on the Sci-Fi Network later this year.
There's so many there that I'm immediately excited to find out, and I just know as a fellow podcaster, there's going to be people listening to this going, we want you to now present our podcast, etc. So we might get some complaints, and we're like, "No, Lee, we're done with you. We want Ernest." So I'm already feeling the heat after having done this with you.
Oh, I couldn't be happier to have had you found me and bring me on. So thank you.
And my final question, like, where's the best kind of place to keep up to date with any sort of news or work that you've got coming up?
The best place to keep up with my projects would be my Instagram, which is Peeples, my last name. That's P as in Paul, E as in Echo, E as in Echo, P as in Paul, LES at IG. And I always post new whenever I have a new project. That's usually the first place that I go. I'm trying to get better at the whole social media thing, so Instagram is the best way to find out about my new works. And I'll have a website that's under construction now, and will be up before the new year. So that'll be the new place. But all that information will be on my Instagram.
It's been really exciting to hear about your story and journey, and thanks for coming on and sharing so much with us.
No, thank you, Lee. My pleasure.